Well, welcome again to the AussieHome.com TV show. A real treat. Today we have Dale Alcock, a legend in Perth in the home building industry. We're going to ask him for his advice on the whole process of building your own home. After that, Phil Knight continues his series Things I Wish I Knew at 20. And then we have David Airy, the president of the Real Estate Institute of Australia, also runs Airy and Associates in Claremont, talking this week as the insider. We move on to a settlement agency panel. Two settlement agents talk about that process and end up here. For those of you who can guess what this building is behind me, UWA, of course, within the suburb of Nedlands, and we also look around Claremont. So that's the show. Let's get straight into it.
Dale Alcock started his career in the building industry as an apprentice bricklayer and went on to become one of the most recognised names and faces in the industry. A past president of the Housing Industry Association and a past Entrepreneur of the Year, we sat down with Dale to get his advice on building your own home.
Dale, thanks for joining us today. I've got to ask you lots of questions about home building. A lot of my friends seem to be knocking down their houses and rebuilding. So what do you have to think about in that process before you get going?
I think if you've been in the home for some time and lived within the neighbourhood, you'll know a lot about your surroundings. And I guess that's especially important because it'll help in terms of the orientation of the home that you're looking to build there.
Yep.
And I guess a lot about the style of what you're trying to create within the neighbourhood. Are you trying to fit in? Are you trying to make a statement?
Yep.
I think the area that we really need to help clients initially is a lot about planning approval process and so forth before we get down to the building licence side.
Right. And how long does that take? People got to be prepared for like an 18-month, 2-year process?
I think the unfortunate thing in established suburbs is that most single residential building applications need a planning licence, and I think that's an element that's poorly understood. A lot of people think they could just come along, get a permit to demolish a home and then simply put a building application in and go.
Yep.
The reality is that most established local authorities need planning approval. So length of time, you could be anywhere up to 6 months pre-construction for a single storey home, and then 6 months to build. So sort of 12 months for a single storey home.
Yep.
For a 2-storey could be anywhere up to 2 years.
So pre-construction is all the paperwork, is it?
All the paperwork, the design, getting your selections right, but also parallel with that, doing the planning permit and approval as well as the building licence.
I presume there's a tremendous amount of choice, probably too much. So how on earth do people start?
I think the thing to keep in mind very much is your budget. I think you really have to keep, it's probably just advice that you get from everywhere, but often it's the discipline that goes missing. And I think the problem is you've got so many small elements that make up a house and so many small choices. It's easy to let something go over by $50 or $100 or $1,000. But it's all those 50s, hundreds and thousands that add up at the end of the day. So tight control over your budget is essential.
And what about selecting your home builder? Obviously, you have some very good home builders you'd like to suggest to people, but just what should they have in mind when they're comparing? Because people would get in 3 or 4 different builders typically. Is that the case?
Yeah, look, we often say that people need to choose their builder before they choose their home. So, our view would be reputation is an essential one to check out. And of course, you're not going to ask the builder for their reputation. You're best to check with family, friends, about a builder's reputation, people at work who have had an experience. So, and there's builders that operate in various parts of the market. It might be first homeowner part of the market or the second, third, fourth home buyer type area of the market. So I think it's appropriate to get the correct builder for you and the market segment that you're looking to build in.
Well, let's talk about the empty lot of land where they're going to put a new house on with you. Is that different to the process of knockdown and rebuild?
Yes, if we're talking about new developing suburbs, often the land developer has a certain criteria that they're looking to create an outcome within the suburb. So they might put design guidelines over a lot that sort of suggest the size of home, the type of home that's going to be built there. But the restrictions are generally a lot less than the older established suburbs. That means really we just are applying for a building licence, not planning and then building. Right. So much simpler.
Presumably it's a quicker process. You haven't got as much red tape at the front end.
Yeah, we could probably halve our pre-construction period.
Right. In
construction's generally about the same, but for a single-storey home, you'd be moving into that home within 6 to 9 months versus, say, 12 plus within an established area. And if it's two-storey, you'd be 12 to 18 months versus 2 years
So
plus.
typically people would rent for a year, which is a sort of usual time you can rent a house for, get it built, come out of that rent straight into a house, done in a year.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a typical story.
Yeah.
And at the moment, is the market gone very fast? I know it's been a bit of a quiet period. Is it back pacing along? Is it very competitive out there?
We've seen activity in the first homeowner end has obviously been really stimulated by the boost. That's now tapering off, but we're seeing the middle and upper end of the market coming back in. Our home improvement business is busy as well. And we're seeing investors coming back into the market. Right. And I think what that all means is that Western Australia is going to be a busy place in the future, Gorgon, all of the resource developments, things like that. So this state is growing, there's no question. So any slowdown we've seen is just a little bump on the way to somewhere much bigger.
Right. Now you've been in the business for over 20 years, your own Dale Alcock Homes, and now ABN Group. You must have seen a lot of change in materials, technology, the way you build houses over that time.
Look, a home's a pretty conservative product, funnily enough. Most conservative, funnily enough, is at the first homeowner end of the market. It seems strange because young people are usually not what we'd call conservative. Where the risks tend to be taken are in the upper end of the market, and we'll see a lot of different use of materials there. Probably the biggest change over the last 10 years has been the getting rid, if you like, of the formal areas. So we've lost the formal dining, formal lounge. We see 2 living areas in those homes now, but both are informal. And the maximising of that family dining kitchen space is essential to make a home work.
Okay. Finally, I suppose, what would be your last bit of advice to someone thinking of either knock-down rebuild or getting that lot of land and building a new house for themselves?
I think unless it is going to be the last home you build, make sure you work within a budget, make sure that you're cognisant of the fact that you might only be there for a certain amount of time, and make sure that you get value for money. And value for money isn't the cheapest price, it's making sure you get delivery of a quality product that's going to stand the test of time.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you've learned a lot there about building a new house, whether it's a knock-down rebuild or a brand new home on a new lot.
Next up, Phil Knight explains why you might want to have a financial advisor.
Broadly speaking, you need a personal financial advisor and a personal tax accountant.